This is Marna Weston for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida at the St. Johns County Convention Center on June 22nd, 2012. And we're here at the Underground Railroad Conference, and the purpose of this conference is discussing people of the Seminole Nation and the Gullah Geechee Nation. And the two gentlemen seated here are participants in the Congress in this conference, as well as reenactors. And I want to thank you both for being here. First, Mr. John Griffin.
Thank you, sir.
And also Mr. Matthew Griffin.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Griffin, I'm going to start with you first. Could you please state your full name from birth?
My name is Johnnie Earl Griffin, and I was born in Groveland, Florida, and that's Lake County.
And what is the date of your birth, sir?
10/30/44.
And would you please spell your name?
Johnnie, Johnnnie, Earl, Earl, Griffin, Griffin.
All right, and we'll come back to you, sir. Sir, would you introduce yourself?
Matthew Leonard Griffin.
And would you please spell that?
Matthew Leonardgriffin.
And when and where were you born?
Born in Lake County, Florida, and my birthday is April 26, 91.
I'm excited about this interview, and I'd like to first bring the audience in to find the question of why you're dressed in the manner that you are dressed. So, Mr. John Griffin, if you would first explain that.
We are dressed as Seminole warriors in the 1800s, maybe from 1825 on up to 1835. This is the dress they wore as a ceremonial dress, a dress to go out to talk with other people or parlay with people, and they wanted to look their finest, and so they adorned themselves not only with jewelry but artifacts that they made themselves.
And how long have you been doing these reenactments and dressing as you're dressing?
Well, to tell the truth of the matter, my grandnephew started first, getting him dressed out and getting him started. So I decided that I would get involved. I was his roadie, I was his financier, his producer, and chauffeur. And I said, well, if I'm gonna drive him all over the state of Florida, I may as well dress out also. So we've been doing it about approximately 10 years now.
Okay, well, let me go to the senior Griffin in this matter. And Matthew, if you could talk about your role and how you began doing these reenactments and why it's important to you.
Oh, well, like you said, I've been doing the reenactments for about 10 years now. I think he's been doing it for about 8. Basically, there in Groveland, I spent a lot of time with him and also my grandfather. So there in Groveland, they raised cattle there in Groveland. So I grew up in the FFA, 4-H, Junior Cattlemen Association there in Lake County. So I was always around him, always around the cattle. So I grew up watching a lot of Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, the Lone Ranger. So watching those television shows led over into learning about some of the black cowboys out west. That led over into learning about some of the Buffalo Soldiers, which eventually led into learning about the Black Indians. Over time, we started going to some of the reenactments that were local, Dayton's Battlefield being one of those there in Sumter County. Started going to the reenactments, started meeting some of the reenactors and other historians, and they really just kept encouraging us to come back each year. And after a while, they really started encouraging us to participate in the reenactments as well. So I think we watched the reenactments for about 4 years, and finally just said, well, when we tried this. So my uncle got my first outfit made, and I started reenacting then, and I guess the rest is history.
Now, for many people, and certainly some Floridians, this is probably something that they are learning about for the first time. This concept of people of African descent, being involved in the cowboy lore and history of North America and the United States, and being involved in the Native American lore of Florida and the United States. Could you just express more your interest, Mr. Griffin, of how you see yourself involved in this?
Well, actually, as Matthew said, we went to our first reenactments, getting involved after 2 or 3, 4 years. we found out through one of the family historians that we were actual descendants of Seminole people. And as he mentioned the old B-movie Cowboys, I always was interested in, if there were Native American people in the movie, interested in how they lived, what was the reason they were enemies to the Cowboys, the cavalry, and a lot of times I saw the way they dressed and how they would take simple things, maybe deer skins, feathers, and make beautiful things to adorn themselves. And as a kid, I used to try to make those things, and my mom didn't care too much for me about tearing up one shirt and sewing it on the sleeve to make fandangles. So, but I guess I always be one to play cowboy in the Indians, and it just segue over to what I'm doing today. But to know about the Native American and their lure and how they took things of nature and made things of beauty, it was always exciting to me.
Matthew, your uncle has talked about how your family is descended from these people and their histories, and I would just like to know, how does it make you feel in 2012, and how do you describe your ethnicity? Because I mean, do people every day say, "Hey, there goes a Seminole," or how do you explain that?
Well, for the most part, I mean, as far as how it makes me feel, you know, we've been doing, like I said, we've been doing this for 10 years now, and to go to the reenactments, to do programs, I mean, you do get a sense of pride after a while. I mean, doing it for so long, and to have other people, you know, coming to you, asking you questions about it, and to be able to carry on those family traditions, be able to carry on that history and teach that to another generation of people who, or even to some of the older generations that have lived here in Florida all their lives and still don't know about it, because a lot of our history books that certainly don't cover the Seminole Wars, regardless in Florida, let alone the black involvement with the Seminoles here in the state of Florida or other black Indians, you know, elsewhere in U.S. history. So definitely feel a great sense of pride being able to do it, and I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be still doing it for this long. So, and so.
Mr. Griffin, how do you feel about these reenactments and putting on display this very unique segment of Florida history?
Well, if you look at the blacks that was trying to seek their freedom, and to think about it, it was a great cost to them. Even running away from the slave master, and then finally to put up an opposition using weaponry, then that took it to a different height. And to know that black people, it's always been stereotypical where they wanted to make black people seem as though they were cowards. They would not defend themselves. Even coming up to World War II, they put out this myth about blacks won't fight, they'll run and leave their positions, and most definitely they won't never learn how to fly an airplane. But to learn that there were black people say, well, in order to defend my family, or defend what I call my home, I made this my home, I will give up my life if it needs be to do that, then it makes me feel good to be involved with people who will stand up for their rights. That's the basis for the United States of America. People come from another land, got to this land and made it their home, and they stood up for their rights to have a home. And the same thing for black people that came across into the Florida borders and stayed here and began to love the land and say, we don't want to go any further. And for those people to take up arms to fight an opposing force, then I recognize them people as being brave people, men of honor.
Now, Mr. Griffin, to stay with you, you said that you had done some research, or it was brought to your attention that you were descendants of Seminoles.
Yes, sir.
Now, what is the extent of how your family left bondage, is, African descended people on these shores all, many of us began as slaves. So what is your family's story from leaving slavery and finding their freedom?
My great-great-great-grandfather, his name was Antonio Sinclair. Him and his wife and I think 3 of their children was in Alabama, Lower Peachtree, Alabama. I think it's called Sinclair County. So sometime or another, they made a decision to leave Alabama and come down into Florida. The family story is that he dressed as a woman, as though 2 sisters was leaving, coming to Florida. They came from Alabama to an area in Central Florida called Hernando County. Hernando County, the county seat, I think, is Brooksville. In the Brooksville area, there were a group of Indians who came down from Alabama. The name of that group was called Eufalas. And they were one of the groups that came down early in Florida history and settled in that area. And we thought about it and trying to figure out why did he leave Alabama, come to Florida instead of trying to go north. What we assumed is when he was in Alabama, he had communication with the Indian people there. And somehow, maybe they told him, say, well, if you can make it to Florida, you have a better chance of being free. So he came down and he lived with the Indian people in that area. Now, in that area, the people from that was called the Eufalas, they had a town they called Chuckachattie, or Chuckachattie. And that town was named Chuckachattie because they called it the Red Town, a wall town, and some people say because maybe there was some brick buildings, red brick buildings there. So there they had a chief called Samaka, and he had his group of people there. But we also found out that Andrew Jackson and a group of Creek Indians made a raid through that area, going down maybe to the Tampa Bay area, and we heard that my granddaddy, who was the son of Antonio Sinclair, that he was a grown man and he married a Seminole woman and took her to his farm place, his homestead, and that's where he had children, and I'm a descendant through that bloodline on my grandmother's side. And Chuckachattie, we've been to the actual site where they planted their crops. It's similar to Alabama. It's got high area, hill area, clay, and where they planted their crops, you can look a long ways off and see whether your enemy or friends was coming. And it's almost as though they chose that because it reminded them of Alabama. And that's the story we got.
Now, Matthew, obviously you've heard this story growing up. You and your uncle obviously are very close doing these reenactments and things together. At this conference, whose theme is the Underground Railroad, what is the relevance and the connection do you feel with your family's story, as your uncle has just described it, and you being here today and being involved, for example, in this interview?
Well, we talk about the Underground Railroad, and certainly we draw a lot of attention to Harriet Tubman and other pioneers. But long before blacks were escaping and going north, they were coming south to Florida. They came south to Florida to seek refuge from the oppression that they were being faced with on the plantations. Being here in Florida, they were able to basically get a new start. When they joined up with the Seminole Indians here in Florida, the Seminoles took them in with welcomed them, with open arms. Basically, the Seminoles adopted them into their tribe, and the blacks and the Seminoles were helpful to each other in many different ways. So basically with the Underground Railroad, you see a system of people that are being oppressed, that are trying to escape the situation that they're in at that current time and trying to go and find a better place. And that's certainly the connection between the Seminoles and the Black Seminoles here in the state of Florida. With both groups, you had the Seminoles coming down out of the Creek nations, Alabama and Georgia, that are coming down into Florida, and they were seeking the same thing that the blacks were seeking too, and that was to basically just a new beginning to get away from the oppression that they were being faced with. So, and being here at the conference, I mean, to be able to showcase all of that information and all of that knowledge from different professors from all around the United States. I mean, what an honor that is to have us to come in and be able to sit among these people and share from their knowledge as well as they gain from ours.
From your reenactments and your research and your family stories, and I'll put this question to both of you, can you decide how you want to answer it? First, how do you describe yourselves ethnically? What is your ethnicity? And then what is the connection between that ethnicity and being a Seminole in general? Or is it the same thing, or is there a difference? Or could you talk about that?
How I would describe my ethnicity, I would start off and say, well, I'm African American. I'm a Black American with some Indian blood in me. And also, not only Indian blood, I got Irish blood. On my dad's side, his granddad was an Irishman. So if I make a composition or combination, I can just simply say I'm just an American. And but when you come down to blood quantums and trying to describe blood quantums, and some people use blood quantums to say, well, I'm affiliated with a Native American tribe, and I'm due this and I'm due that. Wherein me personally, I can just say, well, it was an honor to say, well, I had a family member who was a Native American, had a family member who was African American, and even the Irish had a hard time when they got here. So to come from these different groups who had to make a struggle just to gain a certain position as a person trying to find their home here in the United States, then I can say, well, I'm proud of them all. And I don't claim to be Native American because I don't have the blood quantum, but I appreciate what the Native American has done in trying to struggle to survive. So I'm part Indian, and I'm part Irish, and I'm part Black, and I'm whole American.
Matthew?
So the same thing, just to basically what he said. I mean, most people on an everyday basis just automatically categorize you as being, an African American. But certainly, we do, our ancestors a disservice if I didn't say, well, I'm also Seminole descent. I'm also Irish descent, because at the end of the day, they're still family. So they're still in our family lineage. So I'm proud of, like you said, I'm proud of all of them. So, but on an everyday basis, yes, most people would just classify me as a African American. But a lot of our family, or a lot of our friends rather, do know that we do the reenactments, and if they ask them, they know the family history as well. So, but definitely view ourselves as just regular old Americans. So.
Well, staying with you for a moment, who are your mother and father?
My mother is Angela Griffin, and my father is Carl Griffin.
And where did they originally come from?
Both of my parents are actually from Groveland, Florida. Matter of fact, I think they grew up just a couple miles from each other.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one little sister. Her name is Faith Griffin, and I believe she just turned 14 this year.
So you better get it right. And where did you first go to school?
I went to Groveland Elementary School. Then from there, I went to Gray Middle, and then I graduated from Southlake High School.
Okay, and after Southlake, you're continuing your education now?
From there, I went to Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University there in Tallahassee. I was there for 2 years, and then I transferred, and now I'm currently at the University of Florida.
Okay, and what are you studying?
Food and Resource Economics.
Okay, terrific. Mr. John Griffin, if I could go to you as well. Who are your mother and father?
My mother and father, my dad's name is John Wesley Griffin, and my mother's name is Ora Robinson Griffin. And my dad came out of Sylvania, Georgia. My mother came out of Hernando County, a place called Twin Lakes in Hernando County. And so I was born and raised in Groveland. Me and my only brother, Samuel Griffin, which is his granddad.
And what is your first memory of education, the first place you went to school?
First place, I started school in 1949, first grade at Edgewood Elementary. And after that, I went to Claremont Middle School. It wasn't middle school then, but I went to the 7th grade in Claremont. From the 7th grade, I went to the 9th grade, then we were bused to Leesburg, Florida at Carver Heights High School, and stayed at Carver Heights from the 9th to the 12th grade, came back to Claremont where they had built a new black high school, finished my senior year there. Then years later, after being a musician for 14 years, after high school, I went into the military and did a couple of years, then came back to Groveland. Then I went to Lake Sumter Community College for a couple of years, got a degree in commercial art, 2-year degree in commercial art. So I won a scholarship to the University of Central Florida, but at that time my dad, he was getting up in age and was in a wheelchair. I didn't want to be a full-time student and leave him home by himself because my wife was a guidance counselor and she worked in the school system, so I just didn't take the scholarship.
What is your wife's name?
My wife's name is Laverne Griffin. She's a retired guidance counselor, high school guidance counselor.
Okay. And children?
We got one son and 2 daughters.
And what are their names? If you go from oldest to youngest, please.
Okay. Mike is around 42 years old. He teaches physical education at Groveland Elementary. My daughter Tamu lives in Tallahassee. She got her own business. She trains cheerleaders and teach girls dance. And she was born in 1970, so she's around 40. My oldest daughter, she was born in Winter Park. Her name is Johnnie, and she works as a receptionist for a medical firm. And we got 3 kids.
Matthew started off his school after 1971, which is the year that Florida integrated its schools. But when you were going to school, things were different. Could you describe that?
I tell you, people ask me all the time, how was it in the days of segregation? And my idea about it, when you grew up from a very early age in a segregated society, you adapt to your black way of life. And we had our own world. We had our own entertainment. Of course, we had juke joints. People found entertainment in that. We had baseball teams. We had a celebration every year. Back then, we didn't know about Juneteenth, but we had a community celebration. Of course, we were allowed to go to movie theaters. We had to go up in the balcony. But it was almost, we lived in a colored world, a black world, and it was all we knew. And we knew we couldn't cross the line, but we made the best of what we had. And there's a lot of things, if you don't know about something, then you don't really miss it. But you know there's something missing because you see other people. For instance, when I got in the 7th grade, we had to catch a bus and go 4 miles to the next school. Then when we got to the 9th grade, we had to go 20-something miles to a high school. And I hear people complaining about busing, but if you had to go 20-something miles every day to school, then that's really busing back and forth. But we enjoyed the life we lived. You know, we were happy, and because we didn't know what we were missing, but you know, believe it or not, even in high school, back when you had segregated school, black high school, homecoming, we would invite 5 or 6 different bands for the parade. Those bands come, they try to outdo each other. And just to see the bands coming strutting and trying to outplay the next band, and that halftime, that band would try to outplay that band. It was fun. They did dance routines. It wasn't any of this straight standing up. They danced and, you know, cut the fool, and that was entertainment right there. So black people had things to entertain themselves. Even though we may have not been able to go to see a Broadway play or some concert or anything like that, but we have ways to entertain ourselves, and we didn't know any better. Then when you get older and you see the other part of the world, then you ask yourself, well, why can't I be involved with that? Why can't I have that? Then you may want to pursue a better way or a different way of life. So it didn't really bother me. The only thing that bothered me, there was always the fear in the back of your mind that there's things can be retaliated against you. We knew things, your parents taught you survival skills. Don't do this, or you're going to suffer the consequences here. Don't do that. Don't do this. And there was a lot of things. Just say, for example, walking down the sidewalk and you meet a white woman. There was no such thing, you looking at her, staring at her, and you know better not to do that. You tend to your business, walk past, tend to your business. Because she could say, well, what are you staring at me for? Did you try to wink your eye at me? You were in serious trouble. And I remember in my little town, if they caught you swimming in the lake downtown, the police will warn you one time. And if they caught you down there again, they're going to take you to jail. The white had a high school. If you wanted to go into the football game, they had a bench right behind the goal post against the fence. You paid your money, walked all the way around the field, and you sat on that bench right behind the goal post. And so, well, us as kids, we was on the outside standing, playing in the grass, looking anyway. We weren't really paying attention to the game. But there was rules of survival. At night, when you're walking down the highway, you're always aware that somebody can come out and throw a beer bottle and bust your brains out. You kept looking at the corner of your eye, you know. So we made the best of it. We made the best of it, and just like the black Seminoles had to always be aware that one day the slave catchers may pop up, or the soldiers may pop up. You're always aware that somebody could tell a lie on you, and the next thing you know, somebody's at your doorstep at night, and it was all about survival.
Now, Matthew, you've heard what your uncle has said. You're a member of the millennial generation, which has always had cell phones and televisions and computers. You're part of the most diverse generation ever to come into college, and you've been raised in an era of integration. Hearing what your uncle just said, and thinking about his experiences, you now go to one of the top universities in America, very diverse, and everyone more open and accepting. How do you contrast that experience and that story with the life that you're living now, and what are your reflections on that?
Well, I mean, growing up, like you said, I've always heard some of the stories and stuff that they've told us, and certainly he can tell some other ones that are pretty horrific and by all means. So, but at the same time, I hear those stories and I see the society today, and I think the one thing, especially being a historian, that I take away from it is you have to be always mindful of society. No matter how advanced we think we are, there's always that, I guess, animal instinct that you can always revert back. So we've always got to be looking ahead and be mindful of what things happened in the past, so where we don't try to make those same mistakes again. Like I said, no matter how advanced we get, we might think that we're on top of the world now, but I'm sure at one point in time, the Egyptians felt the same way, the Romans felt the same way, the Mayas, the Incas, the Aztecs. In their respective time, they were all at the top of they were at the top of their game too. And in another 200-300 years, those people who follow after us will look at us and be like, "Well, man, I can't believe that they were doing things that way." So, I hear those stories and definitely appreciate them and try to take some value from them as well. But also, like you said, I go to one of the best schools in the nation, so. I hear of the struggles that they had to go through in order for me to be able to, walk around campus and do whatever else that I would like to participate in, and so certainly I do appreciate that, and certainly wish that a lot of the younger generation too would be cognizant of what has happened in the past, because. He's not that far. I'm not that far removed from it. So yes, I am in this millennial generation. But that was only, if you take out my father, that's 40 years ago. That's not that long ago. When we look at slavery or the Civil War or any of those other events, we talk about them in our school systems as if they're ancient history. But when we actually look at time itself and the evolution of mankind, it's really not that far ago. So definitely we have to be mindful of society and also in our daily lives.
If I could stay with you for a moment, I also want to ask you about your experience at Florida Agricultural Mechanical University, a school, also a land grant school like the University of Florida, 1890 land grant, UFB in 1862, a school with great tradition, particularly an African American tradition in the state of Florida. Could you talk about your experiences there and maybe compare them to the University of Florida?
I stayed at Florida Agricultural Mechanical, or FAMU. I was there for 2 years, and it is a predominantly, like I said, a predominantly black school. It's a historical college or university, HBCU. So definitely, there are differences between the two universities. But FAMU being a 1890 land grant institution, whereas University of Florida is 1862, with Florida having been established for a while, they've definitely have a deeper tradition and have more, I guess, that's the word I'm looking for, is connections in the state, especially with like the extension services, whereas there's a county agent in each one of those. Each one of the counties, so definitely the connection that I've formed there. But during my time at FAMU, I had a chance to meet a lot of great people while I was there, and especially being in Tallahassee in our state's capital. So I'm definitely glad that I went there for those 2 years and got my foundation before I moved on.
Mr. Griffin, what are your thoughts about your nephew's experiences? Being at FAMU and at University of Florida, and also his leadership experiences and his being involved in his reenactments. What are your thoughts on him and the direction he's going?
Well, when he first went to FAMU, I know FAMU got a history of agricultural technology, and I knew he would get what he needed, from there. But keeping in mind that University of Florida is the premier school in the state of Florida when you're dealing with agriculture, agribusiness, ag science. And so for him to go to a predominantly black school to learn about that subculture might be in an all-black school, for him to learn about that and then come to the University of Florida where it's predominantly white, then he can get something from both sides. And of course, FAMU got a good program and all, but University of Florida is bigger and maybe have some resources you don't get at FAMU. And so he's got the predominantly black experience, and he's at the University of Florida where he can get the experience of all ethnic groups. And the key word in this world today is networking. And of course, University of Florida. Even here today, we've been networking with people that basically can help him on his pathway to where he wants to go. So you can get that at Florida A&M, but University of Florida has got a broader horizon, and so I don't knock people go to Florida A&M for their 2 years if they're dealing with agricultural, but University of Florida is the premier school. I can't say any other, but they are there. So we got to be well-rounded. I mean, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Anglo, whatever. You got to know something about everybody. And here at the University of Florida, where you got people from all walks of life, from all different ethnic groups, then that makes a composite for mankind, the understanding of mankind. So as far as I could go with that.
Is it different for you, though, knowing that during your time, perhaps you might not have been welcome at UF, whereas Matthew is? Is there something that you draw from that?
Well, it depends on whether you want to pursue academia. And like I may have told you, I spent my younger days wanting to be a musician, a rhythm and blues musician. My aim was to maybe join James Brown band or Bobby Blue band. So I didn't expect to get that out of a university. I wanted to go from the gutter to the Apollo Theater. So, but I did realize later on in life, by getting a degree that helps you along, I made a turn in my life from being a musician, playing nightclubs and stuff, and coming back home from that and having basic skills in artwork to go back to school and try to get a degree. But in my younger days, I didn't have no ambition to be a school teacher. I wanted to be a hard down rhythm and blues drummer. And the only way you get that is out there in the world of hard knocks.
You mentioned that you were in the military. Could you talk about your experience? How did you get involved in the military?
Well, I was drafted in 1965. And of course they test you and they got a placement system. They placed me in the Chemical Corps. The Chemical Corps back then deals with chemical warfare using different agents like nerve agent. They use chemicals to apply to your body like blister agents, and they deal with stuff they can put in the air that you can inhale and kill you. And the Chemical Corps dealt with flamethrowers, how to prepare them for firing, and also they dealt with protective masks to protect you from ingesting through the air different chemicals and nerve agents, and also smoke machines. They had a machine that generates smoke generators to camouflage the movement of men. So I got training in that, and I was sent to Germany. And there were so many of us in that job, they divided us up, sent us different places. But they found out I had skills at drawing, and I ended up being a battalion artist. Back then, they didn't have computers and stuff like that. In the battalion, if a guy got in an accident and they described the accident, you had to actually draw the truck where it was positioned at and whoever was involved, and that was one of the things they would put in the accident report. And one job I had by being a battalion artist, when they had a meeting, say all the companies go to the battalion headquarters, they'll have a presentation. We had a hand letter on big pieces of paper, different agendas, and our battalion was called the Mighty Tiger Battalion. I had to draw a tiger with little cubs, and the cubs represents the companies, and just anything they thought of need illustrating. Myself and another guy, we did that. So it was a pretty good job. We had our own office. We could sneak out and go over to the EM club and get us a sandwich whenever we felt like it. But that was basically my job as a battalion artist.
What was your unit and who was your commander?
Gosh, that's been 40-something years ago. But my basic unit was the 78th LEM Company, Light Equipment Maintenance Company. When I first got to Germany, I was transferred to 2 different sites. I was located in a place called Berblingen, down near Stuttgart. Then they divided us up and they took me up to a place called Baumholer. And we worked in the ammo dump there, and we lived in a place called Ida Oberstein up on a little mountain. Stayed there for a period of time, then I was transferred to Frankfurt, Germany, and basically there I was battalion artist, and then after my time period was up, then I flew back to America. Was glad to get back here. Wanted to kiss the ground.
Did your time in the Army teach you anything about leadership, and if so, what was that?
Well, then again, like my aspiration for being a musician, I didn't really have an aspiration to be a soldier, because when I was drafted, we were playing at the top nightclub, and we were the premier band in Orlando, and plenty girls.
Bad timing.
Yeah, and for me to be a ground pounder, I just never did catch on to that, you know. So I wanted to do my time and do my service and get out. And I didn't drink coffee too much, because they said if you ever start drinking coffee, then they call it life juice. Then you want to have a life in the military. But it just wasn't for me. I was always dreaming of getting back here, getting back with the band and having fun. And but I thank God I went, because I got a VA card in my wallet, and I can't afford the insurance, you know, paying $600, $700, $800 for hospitalization. God was looking out for me. When he said, well, take 2 years out, your dad went to the military, your brother-in-law, your brother's already in Vietnam, then go ahead and do it. And I'm glad I did, because when I present this card, I get benefits from it. I mean, taking care of my health. If I hadn't got into VA, where they periodically check you and make sure you have what you need, then I couldn't afford to go to the drugstore. So,
Pardon me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Matthew, I want to ask you some questions along the same leadership line, but before I get to the question on your definition of leadership and what you've been taught, you mentioned FFA and 4-H. Could you talk about your experience in those organizations and what you learned? What were some of your achievements?
Okay. Well, I was in FFA, I believe, from 8th grade up to the year I graduated from high school. I was an officer in the 3 chapters, all the way up. Was an active member in the 4-H club, Bay Lake 4-H, and also served on the executive team for the Lake County Junior Academy in the first 3 years that we were formed. But definitely, especially with FFA and the 4-H premier leadership organizations here in the state of Florida, I can owe a lot of the success that I have today from those organizations, from the skills that I learned from them, and also the mentors that I met through those organizations as well. 2 of them being my ag teachers that I had coming up, especially during high school, Mr. Ricky Odom and Dallas Locke, both of which have been very instrumental throughout high school and now in my collegiate career as well. And both of them I can still call on to help me out in any way. Same with, like you said earlier, being able to network with different people from around the state. Now a lot of the kids that I grew up showing cows with or competing with in different contests, those are some of the same kids that are sitting in my classes today, along beside me, and some of the same ones that I graduated with. So the skills that I learned through FFA, one of the biggest things one of my biggest contests that I always like to participate in was the public speaking contest. So definitely FFA will put you out in the forefront. If you take all that it has to offer, it will put you out there, and it will give you those leadership skills that you need in order to succeed in today's society, I feel anyways. Because we had different contests that we participated in, like the public speaking contest or the livestock judging contest. Whereas with those with like or the livestock judging or citrus or whatever contest it was, with those type of contests, it taught you to make a decision, make an educated decision, and be able to defend that to somebody else. Which is, certainly your debating skills and public speaking skills will come in handy. I don't care what profession you go into nowadays. So definitely the FFA, like I said, a premier leadership organization, and I would encourage a lot of kids to get into it whenever you can, mostly coming up through at least during your high school years.
Are you also doing CFA?
I haven't. But I am a national FFA alumni. But hopefully this upcoming year I'll get into with some of the collegiate FFA stuff and try to do some more with the other ag organizations, especially there at the University of Florida. I was also a member of Manners when I was at FAMU, and Manners is Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. And I actually served as president of that chapter my sophomore year. So, but definitely, like I said, I've been involved with those organizations since middle school. So, I look forward to being able to continue my relationship with them and be able to go back and help out, some of the younger generation that's coming up through those organizations, because I know the experiences that I had with them. So, and hopefully to continue that on.
What kind of holidays do you celebrate in your family?
Well, just general holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Easter.
And me growing up, Christmas was always the premier holiday because, like I may have mentioned, my heroes was the Cowboys. To get a Red Ryder BB gun, maybe a Roy Rogers cap gun, and sometime maybe a little vest. We were always looking forward to Christmas, to get a new wagon, bow and arrow. So, Thanksgiving was a great holiday because of the good food. I didn't learn the true reason to Thanksgiving until I got to be an adult to really know what to be thankful of, not only just eating sweet potato pie and chicken if we didn't have turkey, but I truly give thanks every day. I give thanks to God for us being here today at this conference. He picked us out of thousands and thousands of black people, and here we are here speaking of people in the past. We didn't meet them personally, but it seemed as though they guided us, asked God to guide us here just to tell the story. And so Thanksgiving is one of the premier holidays also.
What about May Day or Juneteenth? Were those things you celebrated with your family?
In my community, May the 21st, I think it was, they had a community picnic. I don't know what was the true essence of that. Was there a national holiday, a holiday amongst black people?
Emancipation Day, perhaps?
Could be, but that was one of the most joyous community efforts where people brought food and had a big barrel of Kool-Aid, lemonade, and my dad would barbecue a hog they had procured to do that, and long tables of food and young kids just to be running and playing and have access to all of this food. It was really nice, and after a while they started having a baseball game the next day or something like that. And it was really a great time. That's my childhood.
For you, Matthew?
Let's see. Besides Christmas and, like you said, Thanksgiving, definitely 4th of July. You'd be able to shoot off the fireworks and stuff. Definitely all the neighborhood kids, we would all get together, and it was. I mean, we had a set location. We'd meet there after dark, watch the fire. Where we lived at that time, we could see the fireworks in Groveland off of Lake David. So right after the fireworks were done, we shoot ours for the next hour or so. So Christmas, 4th of July. Look forward to Thanksgiving too, because Easter,
yeah,
and also getting to go hunting during Thanksgiving too. So that was always a big thing for me, at least.
You are both splendidly regaled. I'd like to ask you if you could each a little bit describe some of what you're wearing and the significance of it.
What we are wearing and trying to reproduce is 1830, 1835, what a Seminole warrior could have worn. And like the top piece here I'm wearing, they call that a long coat, a long shirt, and this would be the outer garment. And sometimes they would have a shirt under here. And this garment was actually patterned after the English frock coat. The frock coat was a long coat that came down to your knees and had a cape all the way around. And we found out this cape was to protect you when it rained. It'll run on the cape. Then it had a fringe around it. Then the water would drip off the fringe. And a lot of the things that the Seminoles wore during that time was actually, well, the material itself was a trade item. They did not spin cotton or spin wool. They traded with the Americans or the Europeans. And so, as you might see, I'm wearing a turban. They wore turbans. A lot of the Eastern Indians wore turbans, even the Cherokees and the Mississippian people, the Choctaws. And the turban not only was to cover the head, you can take a turban and you can put things down in the creases. You can take loose the turban if you were picking berries, and you can, tie it up and carry it. And the question came up today about association with North Africa and West African artifacts may have influenced the Seminoles. Of course, we know about how people in Arabia and Egyptian people, they wear a certain turban, and you even got people, desert people per se, and it was mentioned maybe the North African influence, but I can't substantiate that. But I'm wearing a turban, and you might see I got ostrich feathers. I'm thinking there was some entrepreneur say, well, we trading for feathers, and we trading for skins, and we know these guys love feathers, so in Africa they got a bird with big feathers. Why not get the biggest feather we can find and trade with them? We can get more furs or whatever. So I'm wearing the ostrich feathers, and you probably see these metal objects. We call them gorgets, and how they came about for the Native Americans to wear. Before the invention of gunpowder, the gorgets was much larger, and they fit up around the throat, and they were part of armor to keep someone from cutting your head off. And after the invention of gunpowder, they started discarding armor, and so the French, the English, they will use these for their officers to show their rank. After a period of time, they would give these to maybe the leadership of Native American people as gifts. Now, because I'm wearing 3 in Native American society, do not mean that I'm a chief. It means that I just like to wear 3. Sometimes you see a chief might not only have 1. and it depends on his taste. And what happened was the ones that didn't get them as gifts, a lot of the Native American guys would make their own. They would take coins, maybe beat them flat, or they would use copper or some other metal that they got from trading, like what they call German silver, and they would make their own. And even armbands, they made their own armbands, and they traded for the earrings and the nose rings, and you might see them wearing beads, and they traded for beads. Sometimes the beads came all the way from Czechoslovakia, and the Russian trade beads, and one of their favorite colors was the blue beads. And
Okay,
go ahead, man.
Then he's kind of covered the top half. The shoes that we're wearing are moccasins. They're done in the traditional southeastern pucker toe because the toe of them puckers up. The leggings, there's two different styles of leggings. There's the leather ones like what I'm wearing.
Yeah, the buckskin.
The buckskins. And then he has on wool leggings there, which is both correct for that time period. Then the loincloths. The Seminoles, their loincloths came to a point much like this one, and the reason we've always been told for that is when you're in a swamp, so if you got your loincloth wet or you got your clothes wet, all the water would drip down to that point, and your clothes would drip out faster. That's the same reason for all the fringes.
And basically, this is the underwear that comes up between the male legs.
And then the
Garters.
The garters and the sash, all hand woven. And also another item that we're both wearing is called a bandolier bag. I've also heard it called a possibles bag because whatever you could possibly fit in it, that's what you carried. And most of the time traditionally there's one design on the front like this, and then there's also another design on the back, and then sometimes there's also a design that's on the pouch itself. The reasoning I've always been told that one advantage of that is in battle, whenever I look at you this way, you see this design, but if I turn, you see another design. So, giving the illusion that there's more warriors out there, and in other cases, I can turn it inside out. So basically, you just have three different designs. But the Seminoles and the Black Seminoles have always been called the peacocks of the Native American world because of how elaborate that we dress and
colorful.
And how colorful. And to be honest, both of us today are very, very dull compared to what we would normally wear sometimes. So it just kind of is also your personal preference. So the same thing with the earrings, nose rings, armbands, wristbands, and everything else.
Well, sadly, as with all good things, we've come to the conclusion of our interview, but I want to thank you both so much for being here. On behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida, your contribution is exceptional and really appreciated.
Thank you.
I'd like to give you both the chance to just in closing, make any comment that you might make, and at the end of your comments, that'll conclude the interview.
Well, my final comments is I thank all of the researchers, historians, archaeologists, anthropologists who laid down the format for learning. And I like to thank all the living history people. A lot of times you think all the knowledge may have come from academia, but there's people who are associated with the actual people that got the original stories, and I like to thank them for relating certain things to us because it's been a learning process. We had to learn from someone, and they were available to teach us certain things. Some things you rationalize yourself, but we just thank those who sacrificed to gain the wisdom and knowledge that we somewhat have a little bit of today.
Well, certainly I owe a lot to my uncle for helping me get started in this and being there with me throughout all this. So I'm very appreciative of that, and also to all the other reenactors and living historians who have been and continue to be mentors to me and help guide me along. Because as we've been doing this for so long now, yet I can still sit at a campfire and hear a story or hear them talk about things that I didn't know that I can carry on and pass to somebody else. And definitely to those professors and historians that have been there blazing the trail for me. We've only begun to scratch the surface of the information and the knowledge that there is to know. So definitely thankful to everyone, and thankful to be here at the conference and have you interview us. So thank you.
Also, I'd like to add, I like to thank the military men who documented so much information. Being Native American or being African American that didn't have the technology to document things, I mean, using pen and ink. And I like to thank those men and say, well, this would be pertinent in some kind of way to document things. And believe it or not, I just like to say this, a lot of things we black people really forgot or don't know, and it took white people to write it down or record it some kind of way and bring it back to us. And a lot of people don't realize if it wasn't for those people, a lot of things would be lost. A lot of things, because each generation don't have the patience. They want something new and fresh. That old stuff, we don't want to deal with it. But to have documented records and to interview or talk with people who was there and write down what they say, sometimes it's factual and sometimes it's kind of diluted to make it dramatic, but just like to give credit to those people. Being a Seminole warrior, you don't want to give credit to a soldier like, just say, Sprague, some of those guys who really had an interest in documenting things. So, but we have to give them their due. Because even the artists who painted pictures of Osceola, Billy Bowlegs, and all, we would never known what those people looked like, truthfully, if it wasn't for those artists who like Curtis and the many other artists who took time to say, well, I want to show what these men really look like. So we wouldn't be able to try to make a facsimile of what they look like if it wasn't for those people who dedicated their lives that way. So that's about it for me.